Well, we are here on this gorgeous 100-acre plot of land. Got to quote a new driveway, establish it from scratch. Let's get this quote going. All right, so what you guys can't see is right back there, there is a much larger open field than what you see right here in front of us. And the driveway through here isn't going to be that big of a deal. But as we get down on this end of the property, the driveway gets pretty interesting. Let's talk about details. The driveway is essentially 2,000 feet long. This, like I said just a moment ago, this is a 100-acre plot. They're going to build their house up on top of the hill, essentially in the center of the property, which is pretty much the furthest point that you can build a house on this property away from the access point, which is a county road. As you can see, they've cleared the area that they want this driveway to be built. There is a slope to this. The property line is right here. We have a 30-foot area that we can get this driveway placed. As we come down to this end, there is a slight bit of a turn. You can see where they've cut the tops of the trees off to kind of mark the driveway area. So we're going to come around here, and then this is the corner of the property line. You can see the flag there along with the survey stake right here on the corner with the yellow cap, which says this is the corner, and there is a 30-foot right-of-way right here to establish this driveway, the bottom end. And on this side here, this is where things get a little bit interesting. You're coming off of this slope into a turn. Well, you can see this pitches this way and this way. And as you make this turn, it starts to pitch even more severe to the right. So we're going to have to build this up in this corner. I've recommended they go ahead and remove all of these trees off of this corner. It's honestly saplings, no big trees. They will turn into big trees, which is why I have recommended to remove them. Because as your driveway's here, the slope runs that way. So as these trees grow and they get larger, they are going to start leaning downhill. So why leave them while they're small and wait till they're big and potentially fall across the driveway? So that's a recommendation that I have made. Clear this entire corner of all the trees. We can come in here with the excavator and the thumb, pull it out, make it really nice, get that slope established. And what I should say is take the slope out of it so that the driveway turns and it's nice and crowned and level. As we come to the top of this hillside, it gets even more interesting because you gotta think water's going to come off of this field, which they do not own. So you got to mitigate any water that's going to come into this driveway, which essentially there's ultimately going to end up need to be a culvert over there at some point in time. Down through here, not as concerned about it because we can throw a ditch on the right hand side for us right now and make that water run down to that corner and send it under the driveway through a culvert pipe. As we get up through here, it starts to flatten off and you don't have as much of a slope, but you still got to take that out of it so that as you're traveling down through here, if there was ice or snow on the road, you don't end up sliding off your road into the trees. And well, you know what happens when that comes to the case. As you come through here, you can see that hilltop came up and dropped right back off to pick up to another hillside. So I believe we can take some of that out of it. I don't think we'll be able to take it all, but we'll get close and essentially transfer some of that dirt without cutting a vertical wall on the right hand side of that hillside and making a spot that's going to wash or erode. So we've got to raise this up in here some, and by taking some off of that and probably a slight bit off of this, we can kind of ensure that it's more straight lined all the way through here. Again, this will all be runoff down to the driveway. So we're going to have to put another culvert here. It's a great spot for it. You can see that slope, this slope, and that slope all tie together right here. And as we bring this up, it's going to create that ditch. Throw a culvert pipe in there. See you by water. And then you have the best erosion control around, Mother Nature's trees, so that it will control the erosion with the amount of water that's going to come through there. As we progress up here, as you can see from back there, I'm walking uphill again, and then lo and behold, it shoots back down again. So same concept as what we just discussed. The difference here is if we can lower where we're standing at least a couple of feet and take it and transfer it to that end, get some dirt from the 100-acre property and carry a nice long slope, not into the shadows you see off of that tree, but the very next ditch, which will come into play 3/4 the way to the end of the driveway. We'll walk down there and I'll show you that. But if we can straight line that to there, this is just a long, slow slope, which will accomplish multiple things. It will establish our ditch. It will ensure there is less wash. We can mitigate erosion on the drive because it's a really long, slow slope opposed to a steep slope like we have here. So let's assume we just level this out, crown the driveway properly to where it runs to the right and runs to the left, leave this steepness. Well, as that water comes down, if it does jump the ditch, it's going to wash all this out. Whereas if we carry that second hump back there, lower this one a little, carry a long line all the way down through here, bring this up some to that next hump that you see right there, we just mitigated a lot of this slope, which is steep. We're taking the steepness out of it, which essentially will slow the water down, because a steep slope allows water to pick up speed. Speed creates erosion. So if we can slow that down, crown the road properly to where not as much water runs straight down the drive and it sends it to both sides, we have mitigated speed of water, erosion, and future maintenance. There's always going to be maintenance on a driveway, but we have mitigated the amount of times this thing is going to be washed out. And as we get down here, we have the exact same situation. You can see how long of a slope that is. From where the driveway is going to be established to the top of that hill is probably pushing 200 feet. So there's going to be a significant amount of water that can come down through here, and you can see where that valley has established itself right in here. So there'll need to be another culvert somewhere around in here. I'm not 100% certain that they own this tree, but it would be really nice to get this tree out of here because there will need to be a culvert somewhere right around in here. So I've got to ask that question. If they own it, that's awesome. We can actually fill in that left-hand side, cut a ditch through this hump right here, and ensure that all the water from that top and from this top comes down into this area, send it through a 15-inch culvert, and yet again, there is a nice waterway established in the trees here. We've got some really good mature trees to mitigate the wash. And we keep going. This driveway is going to be a long, wide driveway. And as you guys can see, there's nothing done here. They're just driving through a field. So as we get down here, the county road is actually, I don't know, 12 to 15 feet higher. So there's just, I know I'm stuttering around there, but a lot of people might say, well, just fill it in. Well, the issue with filling it in is that would require hundreds of tons of dirt. And again, they don't own this field. They have 30 feet from the property line. So if we kick this driveway up, bring the elevation up a few feet down in that lowest part, what that does allow us to do is keep a ditch on this headwater side. Headwater meaning it's going to be coming down this hill. It's a guarantee. There's no way around it unless you get out into someone else's field and put in a diversion drain, and it's just too much there. So if we can bring this road up, take some of that steepness out of it by elevating the lowest portion, we're doing two things at one time. We're going to create a ditch, same as we're doing back there, but create that ditch to channel the water to our pipe and ensure that all the water that comes off this hillside, which will only come up where the driveway is established. And when I say only and established, the driveway will be 12 feet wide, but the base is going to be closer to 20, maybe even 22 foot wide. So we get a nice flat top, a nice slope to our ditch, and then original dirt right here will stay in place, and all that water will come over to the wall that we have built that creates the ditch based off of our field dirt to ensure it doesn't come over the driveway and wash anything out. It goes down the ditch through the culvert. So the maintenance, if we do it that way, which we feel is the proper way to construct this driveway, the maintenance you're going to have is your ditch. You got to make sure that your ditch doesn't end up washing underneath your culvert pipe, which we would have a fourth culvert pipe right here. If that washes out, your culvert pipe's going to allow everything else to wash out. So these are, you're going to have 4 spots that you have to maintain, put some rocks around them, ensure you mitigate wash. But you guys can see up through there, that field runs nice and flat, but pitched towards us. And it essentially dumps the water out right here, the first spot, right up there by that leaning tree in the second spot, and then between the 2 humps in the third spot, and then the curve would be the 4th culvert. So if you can mitigate all that wash to 4 very specific areas that is naturally carrying the water to that spot today, you're going to mitigate a lot of risk for this driveway. We're going to go up here so you guys can see from the county road how much elevation difference we have. Because essentially the county road is almost the same elevation as that first hump, but realistically to get all of this up to the county road, you'd probably have to fill in right in there about 10 foot. And I don't have the laser with me today to guarantee that or confirm it, but it's not going to be far from that. And it's just, there's not enough width. So 30 feet is the right of way. I stated that earlier. If you try to bring your dirt up 12 feet, that's going to be a pretty steep slope and a really tall ditch, which then creates other risk, right? If you come down through here and you fall off the driveway, well, you're going to have 12 foot of fall, and that's just not worth it. So if we can take some of that out of it and ensure that that ditch starts right in here, any water that comes down through here goes down the ditch to that first culvert, that's going to mitigate the most risk that this driveway is going to have. So how would we perform this job? Number one, we'd have 5 pieces of equipment to do it right. We'd come in here, we'd have a dozer, an excavator, the haul truck, vibratory roller, skid steer. Those are the 5 pieces of equipment that I'm going to recommend be used on this job. The reason for 5 pieces of equipment is when we bring this up, yes, we can come in here and we'll scrape all the topsoil off. We'll stack it to the side. We'll go get good dirt from the backside of the 100 acres, which is 2,000 foot away. You're not talking about a really long haul. That's not short, but it's not crazy long. And you start building that driveway out, or you start at the furthest point where we're at and you start building the driveway back. But you do that in 10 to 12 inch lifts. And as you get that 10 to 12 inches in there, you take that vibratory roller and you pack that sucker in, because you're using really good packable dirt to establish the best base possible for the next portion of it, which is the type of gravel that you use. We like to use what is called a number 23 gravel. Typically what that contains is a size 2 rock, a size 5 rock, and a whole lot of lime dust. And that's one of the keys. The wetter that gets, and I'm not saying soaking wet, but the more moisture content in that gravel product after the original base is established and packed properly with the proper compaction, you then put your layer of rock on top there, which has the lime dust, the 5s and the 2s, and you run across all that with the vibratory roller again, and that's going to pack in there very, very tight. I don't want to say as tight as concrete, but it gets pretty hard. At that point in time, it's time to stop the driveway progress. You've got your base established, you've got your culverts in place, you've got your ditches made. I mean, you guys can see right here, there's already somewhat of a ditch. There's a hump right there. So that water already carries all the way down through here and actually crosses right there where it shouldn't. It should cross down there in the bottom. So you can see the water's already made its own path. You get that base established, you get it packed in place properly, you bring the proper rock in, you get it placed, you get it packed in properly, and then you say, okay, now it's time for you to do your construction phases. Because think about it, how much does a concrete truck weigh? With 8 to 9 yards of concrete in it, they're going to be coming up through here. Typically, depending on the size of the house, you're going to have at least 5 concrete trucks per level. Let's assume it's a 2-level home. That's 10 concrete trucks plus a pump truck, depending on the type of construction. So you're going to have thousands upon thousands of pounds beating this driveway in, packing it even more, but they're only packing it where their tires are, opposed to packing the entire thing. So essentially what happens is exactly what you see right here. The green is where they don't pack. The yellow is where they do pack. That's just from car traffic today. Again, car traffic. And it's already packing the dirt good enough that it makes the grass not grow. It's yellow. That's not just from running the grass over, it's because you're compacting the dirt, which essentially means water skips across it and then it hits this dirt that isn't packed and the root systems absorb it and it stays green. Don't know if you guys were aware of that, but that's what I've always been told, and it makes perfect sense. So with that being the case, and you now have brand new packed dirt for a great base, brand new packed rock for a great top coat for a construction drive, those concrete trucks are going to do this exact same thing. But it's not going to be yellow because it's going to be gravel. They're going to pack it here, they're going to pack it here, and you're going to end up with a hump in the middle. And essentially, what happens is if you don't come back and grade that off and pack it again, your driveway will always have 2 low spots in it that hold water that stay soft for the rest of eternity. So once the home is built and all you have is light duty trucks being 3/4 ton trucks, not pulling 30,000 pounds or anything like that up through here, and you grade it off again with the dozer, you get everything back to flat, and then you start to crown your driveway to ensure that your graded off drive, which was packed by concrete trucks and all the excavators and whatever, you scrape it back off, you run that roller across it again and compact it in, and then you start to slope your driveway left and right to ensure the water runs across the tracks that you create with your cars. And essentially the maintenance that you have to do after that is a grader blade and a tractor, or a skid steer and a grader blade, and you just, because your tires are going to pack it in. I don't care what anybody says, you drive across it every day, it's going to pack the tire tracks. So you just grade off the tip of the crown, fill in those tire tracks again, and you're back to good. And eventually 10 years down the road, you probably have to have somebody come in, if you don't pave it and or concrete the driveway, have somebody come back in and re-crown the driveway, because you're going to take your dirt off your center point and add it to your tire tracks. So this center will get lower, and you don't want to make it lower than the outside edges, or then you create a situation in the center of the drive where it holds water as well. So that's the boots on the ground review of this drive. I got a really good idea of the equipment that's needed. I've got a really good idea, obviously, of the length, the width, and the thickness. So we're going to go back to the office. We're going to put all these numbers in the Excel file. I'm also going to pull up Hunt Stand and draw this out for you guys, so you have a bird's eye view of how this driveway will lay in this property. Well, as promised, here we are at this potential driveway build. You guys can see the 4 orange lines that I already have in place. These are the potentials for culverts. I know 3 100% guaranteed are going to be needed. The 4th one is questionable, and it may ultimately move down here into this corner somewhere in this area. But right now what I'm going to do is give you guys the current property line. And what we have here is basically a 2,000 foot long driveway. We do have set points. We do have certain things that we can and cannot do. And a lot of that has to do with having an opposing property line that we cannot cross. I'm going to get this laid out here, and you guys can see where the 2,000 feet comes into play. Right there. And then if we come over, let's see what that is. Oh goodness, that's going to be a fun one. So we have 30 feet of right-of-way once we get on the other side of the property. I'll show you that here in just a second. But so we're at 1898. That's going to be 1928. Gives us our 30 feet. And this area here, there is not a property line issue. But as we get over here to this corner, right here along this fence, which runs this edge of the property, all along this edge of the property, that we do have a 30-foot set point. So in this area here, we're actually going to cross that property line and come off of this corner. But once we get out here into the field, that's where things get a little bit more specific in regards to the 30-foot line that we have to stick with. And these lines that I'm drawing here, folks, they're not exact. It just gives you a bird's eye view of what you guys just saw in that video. And again, these pipes I drew 20 foot long. We have 30 feet of right-of-way, so they're not going to be to this edge, but this is going to give you guys a good view of the area we have to work with and what we're going to do here. So let's close this off. We are going to actually make this one red and call it the driveway, because that's what it is. Now that gives you guys a really good view of what has to be built here. The property owners are not 100% certain out here in this wide open field where they're going to build their home. So we're going to get this drive to this area, which is that 2,000 lineal foot stopping point. And then there may be some more work that needs to be done if they choose to build their house over here, or if they choose their house over here. They're not 100% certain where the house is, so they want to get really good construction access to this point at minimum, so that they know they can get equipment in and out of this property without having to worry about the issues of construction equipment such as concrete trucks, etc., from getting hung up. If you guys remember from the boots on the ground, we have a decent elevation here, and then we have a small valley, and then we come over here and we have a rather large loss of elevation, to then have that elevation pick up again all the way out here to the county road. If they were to try to get in here with construction equipment, concrete trucks, pump trucks, supply trucks, 53-foot van trailers, things like that, it'd be very difficult to travel this area. I drove my truck back through here, pulling my tractor, and I was able to make it, but I'm in a four-wheel drive truck. Tractor's not all that heavy, and there were a couple of interesting spots, and if it gets wet at all, this would be almost impossible to get trucks back in here and to the construction site. So what we are looking at doing is building, at minimum, a 12-foot drive that runs off of the property line out towards the 30-foot easement, if you will, across this adjoining property. What that does is it allows us to do a couple of different things. I can't really give you guys a side image of this, but as mentioned a minute ago, we've got a higher elevation at the road. It drops off pretty quick down into this valley. You can see I've got the culvert lined up right here. You can see this natural waterway coming off of this field right underneath the crosshair. You can really see where the water runs down through there. And as you progress out through here, you can tell that water runs sideways here. So this is one of those high points, valley under the crosshair there, peak under the crosshair here, valley under the crosshair there. And as we progress down through here, you can see where all of those natural waterways are coming across. This one comes off the hillside, runs at an angle, and then comes down and would go through this culvert pipe. This area in here, I believe if we remove this one tree, if you guys remember just a little bit back on the video, this tree here was dead. Looked like there was already bark falling off of it, a lot of peckerwood holes and things like that. So this tree, honestly, I would ask this property owner to get with this property owner and see if we can remove this tree so that we can come in this area here and create a really nice ditch to feed this culvert, which would tie into this peak. So with that being said, instead of starting in the middle of the driveway, let's start down here at the end of the driveway. We're losing elevation from the road coming down, and we end up in this valley. So the first step to this process is everything in the red box, the red driveway, all of that area would have to be stripped of its topsoil to ensure, there's that word again, that we do not have any type of non-compactable base. Topsoil does not make a good base. It's way too fine, and it just doesn't work out very well at all. If you guys go back on my channel, we actually dug test holes on this property over here in this corner, right in here, and we know there's some really good red dirt on the entire top side of this property, roughly 8 inches down. So we should have 8 inches of topsoil through all of this driveway, stripping of topsoil. After we get that topsoil stripped and set aside, either on this bottom side along in the woods or with the haul truck, maybe up to this corner and stage somewhere over in here. But once we get all that topsoil stripped and we get down to a really good base, that will allow us to come in here, remove some of this elevation decline by building up this bottom area from here all the way over to the county road, which will ensure two things. There's that word again. It will ensure, dang, that word comes around frequently. I see why you guys say my videos released too early for that type of game, but hey, you can always watch it again later in the evening with friends. But if we come in here and we raise this elevation, we're going to accomplish two things. We're going to mitigate some of the slope by lessening that slope and increasing the elevation down here where this culvert pipe goes, which also allows us to bring the water down this south side, this being south, this direction is south. So the water would come from the south and go to the north, or from the south and work its way to the northwest. And we can create a really nice ditch that gains depth all the way to the culvert pipe simply by removing the elevation change, tying it into the road nicely here, adding 12 inches or so of dirt down here where this culvert would be installed, which then brings all of this side up 12 inches, tapering to nothing here at the county road, and minimum 12 inches down here at the culvert pipe, up to nothing here at the top of this hillside. As you remember, I just explained waterway here, high point in the center. So if we connect the high point, which is very little extra dirt added, to at minimum 12 inches of dirt added at the low point, that creates a ditch from the high point all the way down to the culvert on both sides. So now as we progress down this driveway, again, we have another low spot, natural runoff for the water, high spot, natural runoff for the water, high spot. So we would do the exact same thing that we just did here, again, after stripping the topsoil, from this high point here start increasing the elevation of the driveway that goes down into this dip. Again, minimum of 12 inches where this culvert would go, to taper up to nothing again at this high point, which again ensures, man, there's that word again, we have natural drainage. A ditch is the other word for that, bringing water this way to this culvert, and from this high point down to the exact same culvert. So there are two ways that the water will run, and I will give you guys some arrows there. So if you can kind of think that this is a high point and that water is going to run down to this natural waterway, here's the arrow that confirms the direction in which that water is going to run. We come over here, we do the same thing again, and I probably should have done that the other way actually, so that I can get you guys another arrow. And I'll do this one along the ditch. So this being the high point, there's going to be very little elevational change here, but enough elevational change to create a ditch. And the water's going to hit that ditch and run all the way down to this culvert in this direction, and then the culvert will take the water underneath the road, obviously, to the other side. As we continue that thought process down through here, this water would go two directions, obviously the one to the right and now the one to the left, again giving us a trajectory to the culvert in which we will install at the bottom. And again, our high point is over here on the, look at that, did it backwards again. I got to start at the ending point and end at the starting point. This is kind of hopefully starting to give you guys a very good picture of how we're going to direct the water and ensure that it does not go over the driveway, but down to the proper points in which we can send the water underneath the driveway over into the woods, where we have really good root structures and a lot of trees and undergrowth that's going to control a lot of erosion. Mitigate that erosion, should I say. Here again, have another arrow forcing the water over to our culvert. And then things get a little bit more interesting over here before we make it to this tree. Yes, we are going to have to bring the water down to this culvert because we have a high point right in here, and then it kind of drops off again and it starts to pick up again up here towards this top side. And this is where I was explaining to you guys, if we can cut a little bit out of this area, transfer it to this slope, take out the hump that's here in the middle, and try to create a really long, slow slope increasing to the left as we get up here to this top culvert pipe, somewhere about in here. My hope to this is that we can take all the water out of this field and get it all the way over to this culvert pipe here, which will then mitigate a few things. The more culvert pipes you have, the more maintenance areas you end up with. Yes, we could probably get another one in here, but if I turn this into one long, slow slope up to the top, I know by the way the land lays we're going to have one in this area, but if I can get all the water that comes off of this hillside directed down to this culvert, I can upsize my culvert and essentially put 3 15-inch culverts, double wall plastic in these areas, and I can mitigate, I would say 90% of the potential maintenance and erosion that would happen on this driveway, because the slope would be so slow and long. Let's actually take a dimension on that. If we start down here at the culvert and run up here where I believe we can stop the ditch, I mean, we're talking pretty close to a football field, 100 yards. And that to me is a really good way to mitigate some maintenance for this long-term homeowner. One thing I wanted to make sure, I want to give you guys kind of a side profile. Again, this is a high point, this is a low point, this is a low point. So if I was to try to draw that out, what is there today? Let's draw it from here, this being a high point, this being a low point, this being a high point. So to give you all a really good understanding of what I mean by taking elevation out slash adding elevation in. And I really need to put one more line right here for you guys. It's going to cross the other one here, but you'll understand it here in just a moment. So if we can come in here and start, and maybe taking some of this point off, but let's assume we're not taking a point off, but start at nothing, stripped topsoil, packed base, increase the elevation towards the bottom, and then end at nothing. What this allows us to do is come in here, and again, this is a side profile, and this is two-dimensional. This is not three-dimensional. But every bit of this elevation change, which would be from here to here to here, that creates a ditch, and this water is naturally flowing down already this direction and feeding this valley from here. I'll draw that for you guys. Ooh, goodness gracious, that got a little crazy. Let's do that all over again. It's feeding from here, coming down to here. That gives you the trajectory of the water. If we can increase the elevation from peak to peak on a slope, you're going to be able to drive down in here and stay over top of all this, but yet that allows us to create a ditch, again, right in here, that water runs down, and then right here down at the bottom, we would be able to put in, that's a dot. Daggone it. Come on, play nice. I'm going to glorify this for you guys, make it way bigger than what it's going to be, and it's really hard to draw a circle, so don't make fun of me here. Oh, come on, play nice. If we come down after we add all that material and put this lovely, we're going to call it water. That would be the culvert pipe down in the bottom of our ditch. We added the elevation throughout. That ditch feeds the pipe, which is down at the bottom, and then it gets ejected out the other side. And we would do that here, we would do that here, we would do that here, and potentially again up here, depending on how all this ties in. But I wanted to give you guys that cross section so you could understand what I meant by increase the elevation in the bottom, but not the peak of the hillside. Hopefully that gives you guys a really good cross section and understanding of how that's going to work. And as we get up here, things get a little bit more simple. We do have one area where the hillside kind of rolls interestingly, and we'll have to throw in a culvert somewhere up here. But up in this area, after we strip the topsoil, compacting in a really good base, we're not going to need much elevation change to the driveway in here, except right in this area here. So this field sits kind of flat out in here. And then as you could tell, it slopes this way, and that slope rolls around on the back side here and then starts to feed out this direction. So we're going to have to add some field dirt in this area to slope this properly and try to mitigate any issues that they may have right here in this turn. And again, these lines are not drawn out perfectly, but this gives you a really close proximity as to how this driveway is going to lay in here. And as we work our way up this drive, this field area here, it's a really decent area, already has a nice slope this way, a good flat area over here. So in this area, essentially what we're going to do is just strip all the topsoil, pile it up on the side, and I don't think we're going to have to do much in the way of over elevating this driveway like we're going to have to do down in those valleys out in the entrance of this driveway. And as we get out here to entering into the other field, again, nothing major, no major work in this area, but definitely stripping topsoil and establishing a good base. So hopefully that gives you guys a really good bird's eye view of what we are going to, quote, hopefully land and build for this customer. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and as always, like, comment, subscribe.